welcome back. This is Dr. Burton, and we are talking about critical theory. And I want to bring us up to speed. The last few videos were a little bit history heavy and academic-y. Today I want to look at an infographic that you can see on the screen here. But before we get to that, I want to tell you where we've been, where we're going. So I've been trying to make the case that critical theory has philosophical assumptions, it is a world and life view, and has an alternative foundation for culture and the institutions of culture. And remember, the institutions we talked about include the family, religion, the state, education, and the economy. I've also spoken about authority based on insight in institutions, and that those with insight and wisdom into the goal should lead, which is to say reason should lead. Reason should lead us as individuals, and reason should lead in the institutions of culture. But what happens when reason is abandoned by individuals, by philosophers, by institutions? Because that's the story we have to tell next. I have mentioned Nietzsche and post-Nietzschean epistemology. I personally think that this is the heart of the issue, at least philosophically, and I'm going to go into that in the next couple of videos after this. But it may be that when we abandon reason, there is authority based on might, power, and it's illegitimate. And perhaps critical theory may be noticing some of that. I say some, because I do think, again, we have to take critical theory seriously. What are they saying and why are they saying that? I also give some of the history of the secularization of the West, particularly America, and how we have gone from perhaps being a predominantly Protestant culture to a predominantly secular culture, but there are still remnants of that Protestant, those Protestant values in the culture. Today I want to show how critical theory may be trying to deconstruct and expose the remaining Protestant values that are in the culture. And I want to pull all of this together to show how critical theory is functioning as a worldview and how it is critiquing the old Protestant worldview of America. I'm going to suggest that we need to listen, even if it's uncomfortable. I looked at this infographic at first and I laughed. And then I was like, okay, let's get serious. Why are they saying this? What are they saying? And then I saw some things that I hope I can bring out. So we need to listen. We need to think critically. And we need to read implications that perhaps aren't stated. Like, what does this imply? What are alternatives? What would critical theory have us do instead? And is this a critique merely? Critical theory is critique merely, or is there also a constructive aspect to critical theory? That when we get rid of these values, there will be new values that replace it. And can we imagine what those could be like? Okay, so I want to go to this infographic. Okay, I'm going to tell you where this comes from. This was, I wish I could show you the whole thing. This gets cut off. Talking about race on the National Museum of African American History and Culture on the Smithsonian website. I only have a limited amount of space here to use for my recording, but it's about whiteness. Okay, so I'm going to let you go and look that up, but on this page is an infographic that talks about aspects and assumptions of whiteness and white culture in the United States. Now, I've been thinking about this concept, whiteness and white culture and white fragility, for a while, trying to make sense of it. Obviously, I am white. I've never really thought about my whiteness before, but I guess I'm thinking about it now. And I have another copy of it over here so I can read it in large print because I have a hard time seeing this. But I'm going to read to you what's in the gray section here. White dominant culture, or whiteness, refers to the ways white people and their traditions, attitudes, and ways of life have been normalized over time and are now considered standard practices in the United States. And since white people still hold most of the institutional power in America, we have all internalized some aspects of white culture, including people of color. Okay, so I think I don't really have a problem with the statement here, except for if you were to ask me what I thought I was part of, it wouldn't be whiteness, it would be Western civilization. So if we were to replace the words white culture with Western civilization, let's see if that changes anything. Western culture, or the West, refers to the ways Western people and their traditions, attitudes, and ways of life have been normalized over time and are now considered standard practices in the United States. And since Western people still hold most of the institutional power in America, we have all internalized some aspects of Western culture, including people of color, which could be non-Western culture or Western culture. So I'm wondering if that's a way to read it, in which case I would say, yeah, that's true. Western traditions, attitudes, ways of life, a world and life view has been expressed in the institutions of culture, and those people in those institutions do hold power in America. Why? They built those institutions. So my question would be, if we admit to this and say, yes, this is true, what are the implications? Does that mean we want something non-Western in its place? Does non-white mean non-Western? And what would the traditions, attitudes, ways of life, institutions, and culture look like that replaced it? So those are some things I'm wondering. Yeah, I feel like it's hard to even reimagine because the critical theory itself is a Western theory with Western roots and power interests as well. So I'm not sure how we replace it. But let's look at some of these values that are being critiqued here. And I can tell you the history of them from my history talk, if you want to do a little bit of that. Let's talk about rugged individualism. What is that? So it says the individual is the primary unit. Self-reliance, independence, and autonomy highly valued and rewarded. Individuals assumed to be in control of their environment. You get what you deserve. Where does this idea come from? I'm not going to deny that that is something in our culture. I'm not going to judge whether it's good or bad. It depends on your worldview, again, remember? Are we looking at it from a secular view? Or are we looking at it from a Christian view? You decide. But if individualism has been emphasized in the West, it is probably because the individual is responsible before God in Christianity. And not only that, remember when we talked about Luther and the idea of a calling, each individual is given talent by God to be used in the work of dominion. So that dominion mandate that particularly Calvinists have emphasized, probably it's in Christianity and Judaism. But the individual is responsible before God, has a gift from God to do in this world, to enact in this world. So I would say that's where that rugged individualism comes from. So if we want to get rid of that, does that mean we're getting rid of this idea of the individual is responsible before God? I would say critical theory definitely is going to get rid of that. and the dominion mandate and the idea that an individual has talent. So what are we going to put in its place? What's the alternative? Instead of rugged individualism, what do we go with? Collectivism? Some kind of group thing? Identity? Group identity? I don't know. I just don't see it on this handout what the alternative is. All right, what about family structure? You can see the family structure here. The nuclear family, father, mother, 2.3 children is the ideal social unit. Husband is breadwinner and head of household. Wife is homemaker and subordinate to the husband. Children should have their own rooms and be independent. Okay, when I first read this, I just thought, that's a straw man. But then I was like, okay, maybe this is how it's depicted on TV and in popular culture or something. So the traditional family structure. Now, if we're going to a worldview level, again, this is probably at least the idea of the nuclear family and the husband and wife relationship is probably rooted in scripture. So again, going back to probably Protestant Christianity because of the number of children, and Catholics have a different take on contraception. So Protestant Christianity has given rise to this. So what's the alternative? I know what Black Lives Matter's alternative is. The community can raise the children. If you go to the Black Lives Matter website, they have a statement about families and the family unit and how that ideally should run. And it's more community based. It's not based on the mother and father, male and female model. Okay. Again, I'm pointing this out because this is an alternative worldview. I'm trying to show you the pieces of a worldview. Family is an institution. Individualism is about the person, their responsibility before God. Emphasis on the scientific method. This really was the piece that bothered me a lot. I don't know why, because I just don't know where the world would be without the scientific method. But let's just think it through. Objective, rational, linear thinking, cause and effect relationships, quantitative emphasis. This is in the realm of epistemology. Authority, how do we know? And this is the heart of post-Nietzschean philosophy, to critique objective, rational, linear thinking. This has roots in, again, the West, in the knowability of the world, particularly the knowability of God's created order through general revelation. So I'm open. What's your alternative? What's the alternative to rational thinking? Is there any other kind of thinking? I hear crickets. Okay, so yeah, that's definitely the heart of the Western worldview. Get rid of that and, well, we are where we are today. History. History is important in Judeo-Christian Western values. Why? Because history is where redemption is happening. But now look at the history is based on Northern European immigrants' experience in the United States. Protestants. The Protestants are the ones who came to the United States to be free of oppression in Europe. And the immigration policies were such that up until recently, Europeans were the majority of the immigrants. Heavy focus on the British Empire. I don't know if America is really into that, but we'll give it a pass. And what about this? The primacy of Western, Greek, Roman, and Judeo-Christian tradition. Yes, that is our tradition. That is the tradition of the West. That is the tradition of America up until recently, in the 1960s, when we started doing other traditions. And you know what? Part of the tradition of the West has been multiculturalism and pluralism. And that's how other traditions have even gotten a voice in the West. We allowed them in. We said, hey, come and tell us your story. And that's what's happening in the university. So, yes, maybe there is white privilege and white dominance in the institutions, but even the whites have said, let's make a place for other voices. Okay, moving on to the Protestant work ethic. The Protestant work ethic is hard work is the key to success, work before play. If you didn't meet your goals, you didn't work hard enough. I don't know what to say about this because basically I live that way mostly. But I think the critique here is you could work hard and still not be quote unquote successful, financially successful. So hard work without a goal is going to be a problem. What is the goal? What is the goal of hard work? And Protestant work ethic comes from Protestant Christianity and that Protestant vision of redeeming the world. So if you divorce that goal from hard work, then yeah, it does look distorted. And maybe the Protestants haven't done a good job of defending the goal. And it looks distorted, and it looks like a bogus goal to other people who don't hold to those values. So maybe we're running into a problem with Western values. They haven't been supported in such a way that people want to maintain those values. Maybe skepticism and fideism have undermined the ability to support those values. This is why philosophy is important. And let's move on to the next part here. Religion. Religion. Okay, this is it. This is what I'm talking about. Religion is another institution of culture, of Western culture. Christianity is the norm. Anything other than Judeo-Christian tradition is foreign. No tolerance from deviation from single God concept. I, in one way, say, yeah, that is our tradition. And in another way, say, this is not dominant in the institutions. This is maybe dominant in the normal people on the street, but definitely not in the institutions. Secularism is dominant in the institutions. And secularism is what, I don't know, what gives power now. I don't think Christianity is what gives power, but hey, I'll take the critique and say, okay, what's your alternative? Many gods? I'd like to see America go with many gods, unless our many gods are ourselves or our stuff or money. We've already critiqued that and said no. So what are these other gods? No God? That seems to be the dominant view. No God. We are the gods. Remember, God is dead after Nietzsche, so I don't know if I accept no tolerance from deviation from the single God concept. From who? All right. Status, power, and authority. Notice it's about authority again. Authority is who or what rules in the institutions. Wealth equals worth. Your job is who you are. Respect authority. Heavy value on ownership of goods, space, property. Yeah, okay, so maybe that's idolatry. If we are a Christian nation, then this would be idolatry. It's true. So maybe we should accept this critique. I don't think I live this way, but okay. Ownership of goods. I think maybe this pandemic is having us rethink this. Is your wealth your worth? I don't know. Maybe this is what TV tells us. All right, what about the next one? The future orientation and time. Again, what is the goal? Is your view of time dependent on your worldview? So we plan for the future. Goals. Delayed gratification for the accomplishment of goals. Progress is always best. You know what? Critical theory is going to say the same thing. They want progress too. They're progressives. Tomorrow will be better. This is just critique. What's the alternative? Give me a better alternative. Don't plan for the future. Gratify all your desires right now, and let's regress. That's dumb. Let's be honest. Nobody wants to say, let's make the world a worse place. No, everybody wants it a better place, okay? I don't know. All right, time. Follow rigid time schedules. Time viewed as a commodity. What's the alternative? How do we work together without time? If you think about time and how we invented the measurements of time, it was so that we could work together. So that I can say, hey, my train's landing at this time. Can you pick me up so we can work together? So let's get rid of time. Let's just eradicate, paying attention to time and see what happens. Or have other views of time, like maybe we show up 15 minutes late like other parts of the world does. I've been with people who are from other parts of the world, and I was always the one on time, and they came late, and they thought it was funny that I was always on time. So there are, different values about showing up and what's expected socially. Do you want to change those things? I'm cool with that, but I don't know if that's what we're talking about here. Aesthetics. This one, I don't even, this is a straw man. I'm just going to say it. Based on European culture, which one? Which one? There's so many. Steak and potatoes bland is best? No, that's just, no, take that out of there. Women's beauty is based on blonde, thin Barbie? Perhaps. Man's attractiveness is based on economic status, power, intellect? Perhaps. So maybe those things are shallow. Let's just say that's shallow, okay? Be a bigger person. If you're an educated person, you're probably going to be a bigger person than that. Otherwise, yeah, this is a legit critique, and I'm sorry, but I eat hot sauce all the time. This white girl likes hot and spicy, okay? And that's what I love about America. I can have all the cuisines from all over the world any time of the day. And it's beautiful. I can listen to different music too and enjoy different cultures. Anyway, aesthetics. It's a function of our world and life view. And if our world and life view is very shallow, then yeah, our aesthetics will be very shallow as well. And I'm going to say our aesthetics are pretty trashy right now. And it's because our ideas are pretty trashy. So beauty is based on the view of the good. And if your view of the good is pleasure, then yeah, your aesthetics is going to be for that too. And it's going to be shallow. So if you want aesthetics to improve, then we need to improve in the area of ideas. Just saying. It's all worldview connected. Holidays based on Christian religions, based on white history and male leaders. Well, yeah, that's our history. I'm sorry. You can change it. Everybody can change it if you want to. But that's why. I don't think that's surprising. If you have a culture that had Christian roots, then yeah, the whole calendar in the West is based on Christianity. So maybe we just need to do the calendar over. I'm okay with that. It's shallow. It's a shallow critique. Give me a better critique. Show me that, Christianity itself needs to go. That's something we could deal with. That's something we can argue about. Justice. All right, where are we? Justice based on English common law. Protect property and entitlements. Intent counts. Yeah, okay, so justice is a category of morality, ethics. Ethics is a function of your worldview. So yes, the West, as it comes through England and the United States, has a particular development of justice. I challenge you to find me a better system of justice out there. If you have an alternative to offer, I'm willing to look at it. Perhaps one better system I can offer, and I'm not sure it's better because it's a little bit rigid, would be the Hebrew biblical conception of justice. But then we have to go back to eye for an eye, and I'm not sure we want to do that. So find me a better system of justice. Find me a better definition of justice than the West has argued with. Go find another conversation outside of the West where they have argued about justice as deeply as we have. So you don't just get to critique, you have to provide an alternative. All right, competition. Maybe I'm getting a little competitive right now. Okay. B number one, win at all costs. Winner loser dichotomy. Action oriented. Master and control nature. Must always do something about a situation. Aggressiveness and extroversion. Decision making. Majority rules when whites have power. Okay, so probably this comes from a practical, pragmatic strength in American history, in American philosophy, in American innovation, in the colonization and expansion of the American territories. Okay, this is just the character of America based on our history. So, okay, maybe competition has its own problems and its own failures, especially without the goal in mind. What is the goal and what are we competing for? Are we competing for money? Are we competing for power? Are we competing against false ideas? Are we encouraging one another to be stronger, better selves? I compete against myself. I don't really compete against other people. But I think we can also go back to that dominion mandate, this drive to be better, the drive to develop things to be better, to make yourself better. Somewhere on here, there was something about, I lost it, about having control over the environment. And that was also connected to the dominion mandate that a person can, maybe it was, hang on, let me look right back here again. Yeah, here it is. It goes back to the rugged individualism one. I wanted to say something about this. Individuals assume to be in control of their environment. What does that mean, to be in control of your environment? Because I think that's all of us. What kind of environment? Is it just the natural world? Is it the social world? Is it the educational world? Because I do think we do have some control. We don't have all control, nobody does. But we do have some control over our environment. And I think that also goes to the dominion mandate, that if you don't have control over the environment will kill you pretty much. And then there's this last piece about communication, the King's English rules. Is that true? I don't, written tradition, avoid conflict and intimacy, don't show emotion, don't discuss personal life, be polite. Well, okay, why is that? Okay, let me do this one. Don't discuss personal life. In what context? In what context? Because I think that we do have some values about trust and professionalism. Maybe that's a white thing too, if you want to say being professional is white. I heard that. Dressing professional is white. I've never used the King's English, ever. And I sort of pride myself on making grammatical errors on purpose to be a rebel. So maybe if that's the case, the King's English rules, we have ways of rebelling. And rebellion is accepted sometimes. Written tradition, that's how our culture is preserved. And that's why we have things like the great books. It's a written record of the conversation the West has been having for thousands of years. So if there is a written tradition, it's because that's the best way to preserve a tradition. It's also the reason why people want to burn books. It's an easy way to get rid of a preservation of a tradition. All right, so I am going over this infographic with the desire to point out that critical theory is offering an alternative worldview. I'm expecting they have an alternative to each of these points. I would like to see what the alternative communication is. Is it oral tradition? Okay. Is that going to be better? So we have a worldview. We have an alternative foundation. We have an alternative system of values. And it seems like we have to dig to find the answers to these questions in critical theory. But I thought it would be valuable to take some time to go through this aspects and assumptions of whiteness and white culture in the United States. I really think it's a critique of Western Civ and particularly Protestant expressions of Western Civ. I personally care deeply about Western Civ. I do think we have flaws. I think critical theory helps us to see some of them. The two biggest that I see are secular skepticism and religious fideism. Secular skepticism says we can't have knowledge. And if we can't have knowledge, then there's no way to rationally justify these values. Western fideism is Protestants who have yielded to, I think Catholics have, Christians have yielded to this assumption that we really can't know. And they say, well, if that's the case, then we lose all meaning, so you've just got to believe anyway. So it's belief without proof or understanding. That also undermines these values. So if you're a Christian and you're saying you got to just believe and you're pushing it out on the culture, this is what you're going to get in response. You're going to get a critique that says, no, why should we believe that? Actually, that's you pushing your values because you're in a position of institutional power, and those who don't have power and who aren't your white, Western Christians, they don't want it. So the good news about all of this is that we get to do philosophy better. We get to say, you know what, the values that I really want to preserve need philosophical arguments for them. And if you give them, perhaps people will be persuaded and say, you know what, that was a good value. We shouldn't throw that out. We do have support for that value. But what it's going to take is a whole world and life view that supports the values. So, once again, critical theorists, secularists, Christians, Buddhists, Muslims, everybody, Hindus, come, let's reason together. And may the best worldview win out in the end. Thanks for joining me. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.